When the emperor married his white moonlight, I died alone in the cold palace. No one can feel my breathing, but they don't know that I am the only qigong successor. The emperor cried bitterly in front of my tomb, but I had already run to the frontier, eating and drinking in a restaurant, and touching the abdominal muscles of a young man from the western regions. Life should have gone on happily like this until one day an earthquake collapsed the imperial tomb and the emperor found a pile of rotten potatoes in my coffin. That day, the emperor was furious and determined to dig 3 feet into the ground to find me. 1. When the news of Chu Qian and Song Shu's upcoming wedding came, I was in the cold palace, eating a bowl of sour cold rice. My maidservant Yin Xian felt sorry for me and said to the eunuch who came to deliver the meal, "Our queen is only under house arrest, but she still eats and drinks like a concubine." The eunuch sneered, "It's good that you know she is the imperial concubine. Above the imperial concubine is the queen, and I am only following the queen's orders." Yin Xian's eyes turned red with anger. She knew that Song Shu was deliberately torturing me, but no one in the palace dared to say anything. Everyone knows that Song Shu, the beautiful woman who had just entered the palace, has been Chu Qian's sweetheart for the past decade. Everyone said that she was kind-hearted and beautiful, like a goddess descended to earth, pure and innocent. Even the eunuch who served the food sided with her. "Your Majesty, you tried to poison the queen, but the queen spared your life. This is very kind of her." Yin Xian said anxiously, "Our queen was wrongly accused." I held her down and signaled that there was no need to say more. Chu Qianan doesn't even believe me, so what's the point of telling this eunuch? The eunuch curled his lips in disdain and left. I heard the guards chatting outside, talking about how doting Chu Qianan was on Song Shu and how grand the wedding was. Speak softly, don't let the person inside hear you. It's okay to hear it. She dared to poison the queen just because she had been with the emperor for a few years. The emperor will not allow her to leave the cold palace alive. Amid the noisy discussions, I sat cross-legged on the bed, closed my eyes, and began to practice breathing. Yin Xian brought me some water for washing and was a little worried when she saw me like this. She came forward and asked quietly, "Madam, are you practicing?" I closed my eyes and nodded slowly. Yin Xian became even more worried. She bit her lip. "My lady, do you want to escape? I know that your Majesty is skilled in martial arts, but there are guards inside the palace and imperial soldiers patrolling outside. Even a peerless master cannot escape." I opened my eyes and breathed into my dantian. Yin Xian didn't know. I practiced qigong.
2.
My name is Jiang Song, and I am the only qigong successor in the world. When I was 4 years old, I was still an orphan. I fought with a stray dog on the street for half a sweet potato. After I won the fight, I met my master. My master was a fat old man. He said that I had a unique talent and asked me if I would like to become his disciple. I asked him, "Do I get to eat roasted sweet potatoes as your disciple?" The master said, "Yes." That's how I joined my master's sect. There are 3 living creatures in our sect: my master, I, and an old turtle. It is said that this old turtle has lived for 10,000 years, and the way we practice is to stare at the 1,000-year-old turtle and breathe slowly. Imagine yourself as this turtle, without having to breathe for 100 years, without having to eat or drink for 1,000 years, and without having to move your nest for 10,000 years. This is the turtle breathing technique. The ultimate practice of turtle breathing technique is qigong. Because the breathing is so slow, it is almost equivalent to nothing. When we hold our breath, it's like we're in hibernation. We don't eat, drink, or breathe, and our metabolism slows down incredibly. At the age of 15, I became a master, and my kung fu skills were so advanced that they were even better than those of my master. But I soon discovered that becoming an apprentice seemed to be of no use. He has mastered kung fu so well that he can open the gate of heaven with one sword. We have mastered kung fu and can look like turtles. The old man is a bad guy. I feel like I've been cheated by him. I've been practicing for 11 years in vain. But Master did not give me a chance to question him. Through letter writing, He fell in love with an old widow pen pal from a distant place and traveled thousands of miles to be with her in her twilight years. As for me, he thought that I had mastered kung fu and could support myself. Just like that, at the age of 15, I was once again living on the streets. Fortunately, my master has good relationships with people, and uncles and aunts from other sects in the martial arts world take turns to feed me. Today I will learn swordsmanship for 2 days in the Amei sect, and tomorrow I will practice swordsmanship for 3 days in the Bideo sect, and just wander around like this. As I was wandering around, I met Chu Qianan. 3. Chu Qianan was not the emperor at that time, but the unfavored sixth prince. He visited the tavern in disguise and met an assassin sent by the prince. Seeing that the assassin was about to stab Chu Qianan in the heart, I used the Pai Gua Palm technique I learned in the Amei sect. Fortunately, the assassin spit out blood after being hit by me and was then subdued by the guards who rushed over. Chu Qianan bowed to me and said, "Thank you for saving my life, lady." I took a chicken leg from the spilled dish and ate it. "You're only thanking me with your mouth? You should give me some money, right?" Chu Qian smiled. He held out his hand to me. "Will you follow me into the palace?" I asked. "Do you have any chicken legs to eat?" Chu Qianan said, "Yes." Just like that, I followed Chu Qian into the palace. You should have noticed that I am a loser who always jumps into trouble just for a little food. 4. From the first day I entered the palace, I heard the servants talking. "She looks like Song Shu, the eldest daughter of the Song family." Alas, Miss Song has been married to Prince Bayan for 3 years, but your highness still can't let her go. That's right. There's a portrait of Miss Song hanging on the shelf at the back of the study. They soon realized that I had heard them, and they didn't dare to say anything more and hurried away. I shrugged. What's the big deal? Isn't it just a stand-in plot? When I was poor, I followed a storyteller around the world and read many storybooks. I am familiar with this plot, and I don't care. I saw the portrait of Song Shu in Chu Qianan's study. The girl in the picture is wearing a green silk dress. She is extremely pretty and indeed extremely beautiful. So, what if I look like her? Beautiful women are all alike in the world. After that, Chu Qian gave me a green silk skirt to wear, and I put it on immediately. He asked me to learn music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and I started learning immediately, but I learned it very confusingly. Until that day, in the warm attic, Chu Qian drank a lot of wine and kissed me. I looked at him. She was wearing a black robe, with loose black hair, sword-like eyebrows, and beautiful eyes. When you got close to her, you could smell the cool scent of plum blossoms. He hugged me, and I could feel his hot body temperature, his strong chest and narrow waist. I trembled and said to myself in my heart, "Zhang Song, how can you eat so well?" Chu Qian didn't know that I was trembling because of excitement. He thought I was scared. He carried me to the warm bed and whispered in my ear, "Don't be afraid, I will love you." Then he stared at my face for a while, then reached out and extinguished the candle beside the bed. In fact, it is normal for princes to have a concubine even if they don't have a wife. But for Chu Qian, it was his first time. No one could imagine how different the normally cold and reserved sixth prince would be after tearing off his moon-white shirt. I was tormented and didn't fall asleep until dawn. Later, whenever Chu Qianan came to my room, it became normal for me to fall asleep before dawn. Chu Qianan is really nice to me. The palace gave away precious lychees, and each prince had only one plate. I ate them all up in big mouthfuls, only to realize that I didn't leave any for Chu Qianan. Chu Qianan just smiled and touched my head. I remember Asong likes sweet food. From then on, whenever there were delicious sweets or fruits, Chu Qian would think of me first. I have never been short of money for other food, clothing, and daily necessities. He said, "Asong, there are no other women in the palace. All the money is for you to spend." So I was really rude and started to generously help my poor brothers. You know, people in the martial arts world may seem powerful, but they are actually very poor. Even though Chu Qianan was the least favored of all the princes, he was extremely wealthy. After Chu Qianan spoke, all the poor brothers in the underworld came to me to borrow money, and I was generous to them all. Zhang Dasha's mother is seriously ill? Don't worry, I will invite a famous doctor and hire 8 maids to take care of the old lady. The female disciples of Yuqing Palace have no money to make winter clothes? Don't worry, I'll give a thick banknote to the tailor shop right away and make a set of jewelry for each of my sisters. The building of Feiying Villa collapsed? Don't worry, I'll pay for it and we can build another 10 or 8 seats. I made a lot of expenses, but Chu Qian never asked any questions. He said to his housekeeper, as long as Ah Song can smile, it doesn't matter how much money is spent. My master taught me that if you accept money from others, you must do your job well. I spent so much money on Chu Qianan, so naturally I have to contribute some value. So, when I learned that the crown prince and the treacherous prime minister were conspiring to kill Chu Qian, I lay in ambush in the lotus jar in the treacherous prime minister's house for a day and a night. I soaked in it until I was swollen, but I finally succeeded in assassinating the other party. Later, on the day of the palace coup, the prince led his troops to surround the palace. When thousands of arrows were fired, I protected Chu Qianan and rushed out. I was hit by 3 arrows in the back, but I managed to keep Chu Qianan unharmed. After working so hard, he finally got Chu Qianan to the throne. I thought I could at least live a peaceful and happy life. As a result, Song Shu came back.
5.
In fact, it was no secret that Chu Qian liked Song Shu in the capital. But at that time, Chu Qianan was just an unfavored illegitimate prince, so no one cared about him. It's different now. Chu Qian is already the emperor. Prince Ban, who married Song Shu, was in fear day and night, fearing that the hatred of stealing his wife would trouble the emperor, so he quickly wrote a divorce letter and sent Song Shu back. Song Shu came to see me on the first day. She entered the palace. She was even more beautiful than in the portrait, wearing a soft, dark green silk dress that trailed on the ground, and she looked elegant and distinguished. At that time, I had already been conferred the title of imperial concubine, and the position of queen was left vacant. Although Song Shu had no official status after returning to the palace, everyone knew that Chu Qian had loved her for more than 10 years, and now he finally got her. So, she must be the best choice for the queen position. Song Shu herself was obviously aware of this. So, when she first met me, she didn't show any courtesy to me, but just smiled and said, you really do look like me. The maidservants around Qian said that every time he was with you, he would turn off the candles on the bedside. Do you know why? Because when the light is dim, you will look more like me. Oh, yes, you're wearing a pale green skirt too. Song Shu glanced at me and smiled nonchalantly. What a pity, the tiger you drew ended up being a dog. You don't dress as well as I do. I nodded. I understand. Miss Song likes the color green. I just happen to have a gift for you. What gift? I clapped my hands. Yin Xian came out immediately and presented a green hat. That day, Song Shu's beautiful little face turned purple with anger. She went back and filed a complaint to Chu Qianan. That night, Chu Qian came to see me. It was the first time I saw him look so unhappy. Chu Qian said, "Are you making things difficult for Shuer?" I said, "No, I gave her a gift out of kindness and picked her favorite color." Chu Qian was furious. Since then, he has never come to my palace again. Whenever Chu Qian got any good treasure, he would give it to me first. But now, whether it was lychees from Jiangnan or parrots from the western regions, all kinds of rare treasures were sent to Song Shu in an endless stream. Even once, when Yin Xian went to the kitchen to get my rock sugar bird's nest soup, the chef told her in embarrassment, "Miss, I'm sorry. There has been a lot of demand for blood swallows in the palace recently. The emperor said that Miss Song Shu is weak, so I'll give it to her first." Song Shu even took away my favorite desserts, but she still seemed to feel it was not enough. Once, when we met in the imperial garden, she pointed at the jade pendant on my waist. "Your Majesty's temperament doesn't match this jade pendant. Why don't you give it to me?" I don't agree. The jade pendant was very valuable, with jadeite as the base and bamboo branches carved out of gold as embellishments. But I didn't give it to Song Shu, not because the jade pendant was expensive, but because it was the first gift Chu Qianan gave me. Later, during the palace coup, I brought it with me to accompany Chu Qian through life and death. The more I refused to give it to her, the more Song Shu wanted it. During the argument, Chu Qianan came. Song Shu immediately knelt down and said, "My lady, I have overstepped my authority. I have never seen such a beautiful jade pendant before, so I took a few more glances at it." Her almond-shaped eyes were moist, and there was a tear on her cheek.
Jeg felt pity for her.
Chu Qianan frowned. He quickly stepped forward and helped Song Shu up. "What's going on?" Song Shu cried. "Your Majesty, I just saw this jade pendant and I loved it so much that I couldn't help but stare at it. But the imperial concubine said that I coveted the jade pendant. Could it be that she wanted to force her to give it to me?" Song Shu looked at me and said, "Your Majesty, I really didn't mean that."
I sigh.
If Song Shu had gone into acting, she would have been extinct in the opera world. Chu Qianan's face darkened. He looked at the jade pendant and said to me, "My lady, I have only one jade pendant left. Give it to Shuer." He didn't remember that this was his first meeting gift to me. Song Shu stood behind Chu Qianan, curled her lips at me, and gave me a smug smile. I pretended not to see her and asked calmly, "Why?" Chu Qianan still wanted to reason with me. "My dear concubine, you have been with me for so many years. You should have all the good things in the world. Shuer is different. She has suffered a lot in these years in the north. She is not a person who loves gold and jade. She has no interest in most other things. She finally got something she likes so much. Can't you give it to her? Anyway, there are thousands of jade pendants like this in your palace." I listened to Chu Qianan quietly and smiled. "Is that so?" Then I picked up the jade pendant and threw it into the pool next to me. "Whatever she likes, the emperor will give it to her. But my things must be dealt with by me." It is said that I scared Song Shu that night. After she returned, she became so worried that she became ill and never recovered. Even after drinking the running water medicine, the condition did not improve. It was not until later that it was discovered that the soup contained a chronic poison. The palace maid who was caught kowtowed in fear and confessed the mastermind behind the scenes. Yes, it was concubine Jiang who told us to do this. At that time, Song Shu was already pregnant. The child was not saved. She stumbled into my womb, holding an empty swaddling blanket and crying. "Your Majesty, you may be jealous that I have won the emperor's heart, but the child is always innocent." Before I could say anything, she fainted on the ground. Chu Qian followed closely. He helped Song Shu up. Song Shu leaned in his arms, her face pale and crying, like a beautiful yet fragile piece of porcelain that would break in the next moment. Chu Qian looked at me. He whispered, "Zhang Song, you have no right to be jealous of Shuer. You should know that I have been kind to you all these years because of her." After saying that, Chu Qian hugged Song Shu and turned away. After he left, for dinner that night, I ate 3 plates of cherry meat, 2 roasted lamb chops, 5 fried pigeons, and 7 bowls of steamed cheese with sugar. Yin Xian kept patting my back. "My lady, please eat slowly." "No, if I eat too slowly, my tears will fall." I said to Yin Zhua, "You should eat it too, or you may not have another chance later." I guessed right. The next day, the imperial edict arrived. I was convicted of poisoning Song Shu. She was stripped of her imperial concubine's clothes and banished to the cold palace. In the cold palace, I had a lot of time to recall the past. I remembered what Master said. He said, "People are clear-headed when they are outside the game, but confused when they are in it." I followed Chu Qianan for 7 years and thought I was sober, but in the end I still got involved. Love is the most powerful trap in the world. The master was trapped and left his home and career to run away with the beautiful widow. I was also trapped and unknowingly fell in love with the ruthless emperor. But my master also taught me that once a person makes a mistake, it is never too late to correct it. For the first time, I realized how great Master is. He taught me the most correct truth in the world. He also taught me the most useful kung fu in the world. 6. That night, I breathed in and out quietly, feeling my breathing getting slower and slower and my body sinking as if into a current of water. In the distance came the sounds of Chu Qian and Song Shu's wedding. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of firecrackers were set off, and the joyous atmosphere was almost overflowing all the way into this cold palace. Yin Xian sat next to me. There was not enough charcoal in the cold palace, and she rubbed my frozen red hands with heartache. I wiped her tears and said, "Don't cry, Yin Xian. We will be free soon." Oh, do you know what the burial objects are when a concubine is buried? Although my uniform was stripped off that day, my status remained. Yin Xian immediately frowned. "What nonsense are you talking about, madam?" Bah, bah, bah. "Oh, I'm just asking. I'm just curious." Yin Xian counted on his fingers and said, "There are many. Take the late emperor's concubine Lu, for example. She had gold-studded earrings with oriental pearls, coral bracelets with 18 beads, gold-plated phoenix hairpins, and a lapis lazuli necklace." I did the math in my head. That's right, not to mention having no worries about food and clothing for the rest of your life. You can't even spend all the money in 8 lifetimes. The evil dog emperor would rather bury the money in the grave than give it to us ordinary people to spend. He has no conscience. While Yin Xian went to the yard to get clothes, I did a few more things. When Yin Xian came back, everything was ready. She helped me to sleep, and I casually said, "Oh, by the way, I left a letter under the pillow. If the emperor comes to see me, you can give it to him for me. Don't forget." Yin Xian hesitated for a moment. She actually knew that Chu Qian and Song Shu had just gotten married, and they probably wouldn't come to see me for a long time. But she was afraid that I was in a bad mood, so she comforted me and said, "I will remember this, don't worry, madam." I closed my eyes and darkness surrounded me. Breathing becomes slower and slower, and the blood flow also becomes slower and slower. I felt my body getting cooler, first to my hands and feet, then moving up my limbs and finally to my heart. The heart beats slower and slower until it stops. Very good, it can be considered as paying back for all the extra beats it jumped when I saw Chu Qianan over the years. Chu Qianan should be in the bridal chamber with Song Shu, right? This time, he finally didn't have to deliberately extinguish the candles. 7. On the next morning, everyone witnessed the love between the newlywed emperor and empress. Chu Qianan sat with Song Shu in Fingi Palace. This was the first day Song Shu became the queen. According to the rules, all the concubines should come to pay their respects to her. But Chu Qian had no other concubines. His only concubine was the noble concubine Jiang Song, who had been banished to the cold palace. Song Shu held Chu Qianan's arm and said softly, "Noble consort Jiang is still noble consort. Why not let her come and pay her respects as well?" Chu Qian's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "She poisoned you and has been banished to the cold palace. Why do you still need to see her?" Song Shu said softly, "Sister Jiang was just confused for a moment. Besides, Shu'er is finally marrying you now, and she wants everyone's blessing." Chu Qian turned his head and looked at Song Shu's beautiful face. After a long while, he sighed slightly and said, "As long as you are happy." He turned to the eunuch and said, "Bring concubine Jiang here." Song Shu sat on the chair with a faint smile on her lips. Only when Jiang Song really comes and witnesses the love between him and Chu Qianan will he truly win. But the eunuch was gone for a long time. Nearly half an hour passed before the eunuch returned with a pale face. He knelt on the ground, trembling, and after a long while he managed to utter a few words with a trembling throat. "Concubine Jiang has passed away." There was a sound of breaking in the hall. The teacup in Chu Qianan's hand fell suddenly to the ground. The hall was quiet for a long time. After a while, Chu Qianan smiled. He pointed at the eunuch who was reporting. "I understand. Jiang Song asked you to report it like this, right? You have been in the palace for so many years, but you still don't know the rules. You dare to make such a joke. She just wanted me to go see her, didn't she? She's acting like a child. I was too lenient with her before." The young eunuch raised his head. He didn't dare to say anything else. His face was pale and covered with tears of fear. Chu Qian looked at the eunuch's expression. He gradually stopped laughing. Slowly getting up, he whispered, "Are you telling the truth?" The young eunuch kowtowed and said, "It is absolutely true. When concubine Jiang was found this morning, she was already cold." "Emperor," Song Shu screamed, because she saw that Chu Qian's body shook violently and he almost fell to the ground.
8.
I finally waited for Chu Qian. The eunuch's long voice sounded. "The emperor has arrived." However, no one came in. Chu Qian has been standing at the door. Yin Xian's eyes were swollen like 2 walnuts and he said coldly, "Your Majesty, if you want to come in, just come in. What is there that you are afraid to see? The queen loved you so much when she was alive. Even if she became a ghost, she would not hurt you." 2. These words hit Chu Qian on the back of the head like a heavy blow. His body swayed again, and the blood drained from his face. Song Shu quickly supported him. "Your Majesty." Chu Qian shook off Song Shu's hand. He came in and came up to me. "A song," he whispered. In the past, whenever he called me like that, I would happily respond, "Hey." But this time, I couldn't respond to Chu Qian. "A song." Chu Qian still called me stubbornly. "You don't. You might die. You're so healthy, so happy." The imperial physician beside me examined me and said softly to Chu Qian, "Your Majesty, the concubine probably died from a relapse of an old injury. She had 3 arrow wounds in her back and a blow to her left shoulder that was very close to her heart." Chu Qian was stunned. He knew how these injuries came about. The arrow wound in his back was caused by the arrow he received while protecting him from the throne. The left shoulder was injured when the traitor was assassinated by the other party's guards.
Palm.
Chu Qian asked me if it hurt, and I shook my head while chewing the chicken leg. "No, it doesn't hurt. Look, I am eating delicious food now, and I am in great shape. How can it not hurt? It's just that I'm not used to saying it." As the wounds continued to grow and the depression became serious, I dared to speculate. The concubine died of heart failure. Chu Qian lowered his eyes and looked at me. He stretched out his hand, as if to touch my face. "It's me."
I killed her.
But Chu Qian couldn't say anything. Yin Xian stood up and stood in front of me. "The corpse is unlucky. For the sake of the dragon's health, Your Majesty should not touch it." She protected my body and prevented Chu Qian from touching me. "Even Yin Xian hates her so much, not to mention," he said hoarsely, "before leaving, did you blame me?" Yin Xian was silent. The queen didn't mention it. She took out a letter and said coldly, "This is what the queen left for the emperor. Please read it yourself." Chu Qian dismissed everyone. He sat alone in the cold palace, beside my body, and unfolded that letter. As white as the snow on Tianshan Mountain, as bright as the moon in the clouds. "I heard that you have 2 minds, so I came to settle the matter with you. It is Song of the White-Headed Girl, a very long poem. However, only these 4 sentences were written on the first page of letter paper, and that was it." Chu Qian turned to the second piece of letter paper. "Sorry, I really forgot how to recite the rest. I'll just say what I want to say. Chu Qian, I like you. I know you don't like me, but it doesn't matter. Thank you for being nice to me all these years. I know I won't survive, so I leave this letter and say a few words to you. There is a huge black rock in the east of the lake. I always sleep on it. I feel particularly safe every time I lie on it, so I hope you can bury it with me so that I can always sleep on it. I don't know many people in the palace, except you. Only Yin Xian has been with me all the time. She is the only one I am worried about. I hope you can give her more money and send her out of the palace. After all, you should know that this crappy palace is really not a place for people to stay." Throat. "Actually, I am worried about you too. From now on, I will not fight for you or kill for you. When I cannot protect you, you have to protect yourself, be a good emperor, and don't cause so many troubles. Enemy. We won't see each other again. Ginger."
9.
Chu Qian finished reading my letter. The room was very quiet, and the only sound was his breathing. Suddenly, hot tears fell on my face. I suddenly realized that Chu Qian was crying. This was the first time I saw him cry. Why did he buy it? He clearly said that he loved Song Shu. Would you be so sad if someone you don't love died? I don't understand, and my master didn't teach me either. I don't know how long it took, but the eunuch came in and reported. Your Majesty, the Empress suddenly had palpitations and passed out. Chu Qian stood up. The tears on his face had dried up, and he looked as cold as usual. Got it. I'll be on my way there now. Look, even if my death makes Chu Qian a little sad, he will still go to accompany Song Shu. Fortunately, I don't care anymore.
10.
My body is placed in the royal ancestral temple. A day will be chosen for burial. Yin Xian kept vigil for me. She cried and fainted several times. I felt so distressed that I wanted to sit up from the coffin to comfort her several times. But I can't. Yin Xian has a quick temper and can't hide things. For the sake of my future plans, I can only put her in an unfair position for now. Chu Qian never came to see me. But he followed my last wish and moved the huge black stone from the east of the lake so that I could lie on it and be buried. On the day of sealing the coffin and burial, Chu Qian and Song Shu came together. Chu Qian remained calm the entire time, until a palace maid timidly presented something to Song Shu. Empress, this was picked out from the lotus pond. It seems to be what you wanted before. It was a jade pendant, with a jadeite base and bamboo joints carved in gold. I wore it for many years, and then threw it into the lotus pond. Song Shu scolded in a low voice. What an unlucky thing.
Vodoit.
She wanted to throw the jade pendant away, but Chu Qian suddenly said, Give it to me. Somehow, the golden exterior of the jadeite was. At that moment, it suddenly fell out of Qian's hand. The jade pendant in his hand was divided into several pieces. Judging from the edges, it has been broken for a long time. Chu Qian was startled. Broken jade? You know, jade can protect its owner from bad luck, but broken jade is not reliable and can even bring disaster. I have so many rare treasures in my palace. Why would I carry a broken piece of jade on my body? Yin Xian said with red eyes. The queen told me that this jade pendant was given to her by you when you first met her. Chu Qian was stunned. When she wore this jade pendant to protect the emperor from taking the throne, the prince's men, an arrow was shot, and it was this jade pendant that blocked it. The jade pendant was broken into pieces, so the queen found a craftsman to make a shell out of gold, and then pieced the jade pendant together. She said that if she wore this jade pendant, she would be blamed for any bad things and all the good things would be left to the emperor. She loves the emperor, so she is willing to protect him from disasters. 11. The coffin was suddenly opened. The coffin was suddenly opened. There was a noisy sound of people, including the eunuchs and palace maids trying to stop them, and Song Shu crying. Chu Qian is calling my name. Aling, Aling. Lian is here. Lian is here to accompany you. He seemed to be crazy, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was struggling to lie down in the coffin. 3. Song Shu yelled. Hurry up and take the emperor away. There was chaos everywhere, and finally, Chu Qian was forcibly dragged away by the palace servants. The coffin was sealed and buried in the ground. After a long time, I gradually recovered my breathing. When I opened my eyes, what caught my eye were the piles of gold, silver, and jewelry in the coffin, which almost blinded me. I knew there would be a lot of burial objects, but I didn't expect there would be so many. I was so happy that I almost couldn't breathe. At this moment, I finally regained my breath, but the air in the coffin was limited. The top is already sealed by thick mud, even a peerless master. It's also hard to open. But it's okay, I brought help.
Hey, old man.
I tapped on the black boulder. After a moment, the black boulder emerged with a head, 4 legs, and a tail. Yes, it is the founder of our qigong school, the great-grandfather of my master's great-grandfather, the 10,000-year-old turtle. It slowly pushed open the coffin lid, and then continued to push open the upper layer of mud. A rush of fresh air. I stretched my arms joyfully toward the sky. I'm finally free.
12.
3 years later, everyone knew that there was a beautiful, wealthy woman in the frontier tavern. Handsome young men all wanted to win her favor. Obviously, that rich woman is me. At this moment, 8 handsome young men lined up in front of me. In various ways, they try to win my heart. The first one wrote a poem on the spot, expressing his love for me with great passion. The second one casually splashed ink and painted my beauty with paint. The third person played the guqin, entrusting his heart to the water-like sound of the instrument. Everyone has unique talents. But I was all drowsy and clapped perfunctorily until the 8th one came up. I propped up my eyelids that were about to close and said sleepily, "What talents do you have? Show them off." The young man said, "Yes, sir," and then lifted his outer robe to reveal well-defined abdominal muscles. I sat up in shock from my dying illness and stood up with a somersault, clapping vigorously. "Good, good. Add to bookshelf." The other young men were all angry. I didn't expect that the rich woman had a lot of money, but her spiritual level didn't keep up, and she only liked some vulgar tastes. I said to the 8th young man, "You will drink with me today." He came over and sat down next to me. This is a very handsome young man from the western regions, with a high nose, deep eyes, and fair skin. Snow white, tall and strong. So outstanding that you can't take your eyes off her. But after all, I've seen the world, so I acted very calmly. I touched her Adam's apple, then her chest muscles, and finally her abdominal muscles, and then I praised calmly, "It's really the best." I gave the young man from the western regions a handful of gold beads. "I have heard of your beauty for a long time. It is my honor to serve you a drink. I will not charge any money." I said arrogantly, "You're too talkative. Just take it if I give it to you." The young man from the western regions was overjoyed, obviously because of my domineering beauty. The rich woman admired me even more. He poured me a glass of wine and said, "From your accent, I know you are not from here. May I ask where you are from?" I said calmly, "Me? Just a dead person." Actually, I didn't introduce myself like this at the beginning. Make up some origins. But I soon realized that this was the coolest way to introduce myself. That melancholy and world-weariness will enhance my mysterious charm. Sure enough, after hearing this, the young man from the western regions widened his glassy eyes and said, "The girl must be someone with many stories." In the lobby of the restaurant, a storyteller was telling stories about the current emperor and queen. That is Chu Qian and Song Shu. In the story, Chu Qian and Song Shu are childhood sweethearts. When he was young, he was of low status and could not protect his beloved. He watched Song Shu marry and go to the north. Later, Chu Qian survived a dangerous situation and succeeded in seizing the throne. He finally brought Song Shu back and made her the queen. Over the years, there was only one queen in the palace, and Chu Qian never took another concubine. Other concubines. The young man from the western regions asked me, "Girl, what's wrong?" I came to my senses and said, "It's okay." This is the best ending for the story. However, before I could finish my admiration, a fast horse appeared under the restaurant. The man reined in his horse, ran up to me, pushed the young man from the western regions out of the room, and then grabbed my collar and collapsed.
Road.
Oh no, there's an earthquake. 13. The person who came was none other than Yin Xian. After she was released from the palace, I stopped her in a deserted alley and wanted to tell her that I was not dead. As a result, she screamed "ghost" and ran away for 2 miles. If it weren't for my good martial arts skills, I would have almost failed to catch up with her. After realizing that I was not really dead, Yin Xian cried out death. Ghost hugged me tightly and almost strangled me to death. At this moment, I was confused. Didn't the earthquake happen a month ago? Why are you here now? A month ago, I woke up from my sleep and felt a slight vibration. But it was nothing serious, and I went back to sleep quickly. Yin Xian's face turned pale. The epicenter was in the suburbs of Beijing. I suddenly realized something and was immediately shocked. The outskirts of Beijing are where the imperial tombs are located. You mean? Yin Xian nodded and closed his eyes in despair. There was a landslide. The imperial tomb collapsed. Everyone else's grave is fine. Only your coffin was uncovered. The lid of the coffin flew off, and everyone saw that there was only a pile of rotten potatoes in the coffin. 14. That's too much. This is really too much. There were too many gold and silver treasures buried with the deceased. I could not use them all by myself, so I wrote to my fellow tomb raiders and invited them to rob the tomb. It would be fine if they took the burial objects away, but why did they just casually put them in? Throwing potatoes. Even if there is no earthquake, Chu Qianan will see. A bunch of bean sprouts. Isn't that just as weird? Yin Xian's face turned pale. The emperor was furious and said that he would find you even if he had to dig deep into the ground. We got the news too late. In a month, maybe they have almost found this place. I covered Yin Xian's mouth and said, "Crow mouth. Stop talking, hurry up. Escape." But it was too late. The sound of horse hooves was heard from below the tavern. The government officials had arrived. In the restaurant, the dancer, Xiao Xian, and the storyteller were all scared and scattered. Escape. Amidst the countless carriages, a black horse leaped out, with a familiar figure on it. He looked up, and I looked down. We looked at each other from a distance, separated by a floor. Chu Qianan. He actually found this place himself. 15. I finally saw Chu Qianan again. He sat opposite me. We were the only two people in the small room. He was not wearing a dragon robe, but a dark casual suit, and he was accompanied by dozens of guards, so the spectators in the restaurant thought he was the son of a military commander. Chu Qianan asked the guards to wait outside, so I let Yin Xian leave as well. Yin Xian was extremely worried and looked back at me every few steps as she left. I used my eyes to tell her not to worry. I waited until Chu Qian and I were the only ones left in the room before I started.
Look at him.
He had lost a lot of weight, his cheeks and eye sockets were sunken, and he no longer had the vigor and vitality he once had. It seems that he is not living a happy life. But after all, he had been the emperor for another 3 years, and his majesty was even greater. When he had no expression on his face, it was easy for people to be scared. Add to bookshelf. Chu Qianan stared at me with his dark and deep pupils. He said coldly, "Nice to meet you again, Jiang Song." When I was in the palace, people called me Jiang Ling in front of others and a Song in private. After Song Shu returned to the palace, he never mentioned my name again. Call me concubine coldly. Although he called my name with anger now, he actually seemed to want to get closer to me. I have booked the room in this restaurant for a long time. Chu Qianan is now. I'm a guest, so I want to lighten the mood. You must be thirsty after all the traveling. Someone, pour some tea. The door opened, and the handsome, tall young man from the western regions walked in. Start brewing tea. Chu Qian glanced at him, and his face immediately darkened. Is there no other maid in this restaurant? Why are you the one serving? Something like pouring tea. The young man from the western regions bowed quickly and said, "Sir, yes, but the young lady usually lets me serve her." It would have been fine if he didn't say anything. Once he started talking, Chu Qianan's face became even uglier. The young man from the western region saw that Chu Qian looked unhappy and thought that he should. I made a mistake and hurriedly explained. Actually, I'm not the only one. There are 7 other brothers. The 8 of us take turns.
How to say it?
I glanced at Chu Qian secretly. It feels like if you stick a fuse into his head, he will explode on the spot like a thunder and firebomb. I sighed, waved my hand, and asked the young man from the western region to leave. Chu Qian looked at me coldly. He said, "Why did you lie to me?" I poured some water and said, "Sir, drink some tea to moisten your throat first." I'm asking you, why did you lie to me? I can't stand it anymore. I threw the teapot onto the table, and the tea splashed everywhere. What else? I said coldly. Chu Qianan, if I didn't lie to you, would I be able to get out? If I don't leave the palace, how many years will you keep me in the cold palace? The food in the cold palace is rotten, the bedding is single-layered, and do you see the scar on my hand? It is a frostbite that I got that year. Of course I have to lie to you. Of course I have to pretend to be dead. Otherwise, I would have died in the cold palace long ago. Chu Qianen's eyes fell on my arm, and the scars of the frostbite touched my arm. Shocking. There was a flash of heartache, guilt, and regret in his eyes. When he opened his mouth again, his tone had weakened. Song, I am sorry to have wronged you, but I won't let you die. I didn't say anything. There was a long silence in the room. After a long time, Chu Qianan gently placed something on the table and pushed it over. It's that jade pendant. He asked a craftsman to make a new outer shell. The jade pendant was shiny, and it was obvious that it had always been.
He wore it on his body.
I've been wearing it for 3 years. I regret that I didn't recognize it as our love gift. I always have dreams in which you come back from the assassination attempt at the Prime Minister's mansion, covered in wounds, but you lie on the bed smiling and comforting me, saying that it doesn't hurt at all. And on the way to seize the throne, you escorted me into the palace with 3 arrows stuck in my back and snatched my father's will. The moment I succeeded, you said to me, Chu Qian imitated my tone at that time. That's great. Qian, you will be the emperor from now on, and no one will dare to bully you anymore. Warm liquid dripped onto the jade pendant. Chu Qianan covered his face to prevent me from seeing him crying. I was silent for a while, then whispered, Your Majesty, the jade is indeed beautiful. But once it's broken, it's broken. Even if you force it back together, it's still broken. Chu Qianan's body trembled. He looked at me with endless bitterness in his eyes. He finally said, Song, I'm sorry. I shook my head. I'm not sorry. Chu Qian opened his mouth anxiously, trying to explain. Ling, the person I love is you. I had my own reasons for what happened back then, and you don't care about the affairs of the court. Understand. I interrupted him. Your Majesty, I understand. Chu Qian was stunned. I smiled. I know you want to tell me that the Song family has many disciples in the court. You have just ascended the throne, and you need the power of the Song family to maintain your position. So, even though you know in your heart that it was not me who poisoned you, but that Song Shu staged it herself, you still have to coax her and cooperate with her, so you can only punish me by sending me to the cold palace. You still want to say that by sending me to the cold palace, the Song family thought that I would not threaten Song Shu's position as queen, so they did not take action against me. You're actually protecting me, right? Chu Qian opened his mouth slightly, unable to utter a word. He took so much trouble to find me, probably just to tell me this. I didn't expect that I already knew it. Yes, I actually understand everything, but I just like to pretend that I don't understand. Just like I am actually in pain, but I like to pretend that I am not in pain. I'm not really stupid, but my master taught me that living too clearly is meaningless. In life, being silly and happy is the happiest thing. Your Majesty, I know you love me, but this love is no longer what I want. Chu Qian couldn't bear it any longer. He took a step forward and held my hand tightly. The emperor looked at me with an almost humble look. Grandpa, then tell me, what do you want? I'll give it all to you. I laughed. Really? Of course it is true. This is the promise of the emperor. Okay. I put away my smile. Then I want you to stop being. Son. Chu Qian was stunned. I'll find you a drug to fake your death. From now on, you are no longer Chu Qianan, but my husband Jiang Ling. Let's go boating on the river and have fun. From now on, they will be an ordinary couple. In this case, let's forget the past and I'll love you all over again. How about that? Chu Qianan's face turned pale. I smiled and pulled my hand back. See, Your Majesty, you can't do it. You love me, but your love only brings me imprisonment, indifference, grievance, and torture. I don't blame you, but forgetting each other is the best choice for us. Chu Qian was silent for a very long time. After a long while, he whispered, Ling, one last question. Do you still like me? I smiled. Your Majesty, please go back. The Queen is still waiting for you. There are many women in the world who like you. But I am no longer one of them.
16.
Chu Qian left. The officials who surrounded the tavern also left. Yin Xian rushed in, and when she saw that I was safe and sound, she stamped her feet and cried. Oh my God! I was scared to death. Deceiving the emperor is a crime punishable by the extermination of all 9 generations of your clan. I thought both of us would die. I poured the wine with a smile. No. Yin Xian grabbed my hand and said, "What did you say to the emperor? Can we just send him away like this?" And when the emperor left, his eyes were red and he seemed to be in a very depressed mood. I took a sip of wine and said calmly, "Depression is normal. People who want everything are doomed to live an unhappy life." 17. After that, Chu Qianan never came to see me again. I continued to get drunk in the tavern on the border and also adopted a child. A little orphan, teach them to practice qigong. 17. Add to bookshelf. After that, Chu Qianan never came to see me again. I continued to get drunk in the taverns on the border, and I also adopted a few little orphans and taught them to practice qigong. Yin Xian bought some business in the city and became a famous business owner in the western regions. She was involved in all the businesses related to tea, horses, and satin, and the news spread far and wide. She often tells me news from the capital. After Chu Qianan had fully grown his wings, he thoroughly investigated the Song family on dozens of charges, including monopolization and corruption. The Song family, which had dominated the economy since the time of the previous emperor, was completely overthrown. Song Shu was banished to the cold palace. It is said that Chu Qianan poisoned her food. It was the same poison I gave her. I was very calm when I heard the news. The past events in the palace seemed to be a thing of the past life. The story of the writer can no longer stir the slightest emotion in my heart. A few years later, the chief eunuch in the palace came all the way to this small town in the western regions. He said Chu Qianan was seriously ill and was holding on to his last breath and wanted to see me for the last time. I hesitated for a long time and finally said to my father-in-law, "I'm still not going. Your Majesty has gotten everything he wanted in his life, and I am the only regret. Keeping this regret in mind, I still have something to support me. If I go back and see him, he might feel that all his wishes in this world have been fulfilled, and his anger will fade away. So please tell the emperor to treat his illness well. He and I have a long future together." The chief eunuch bowed and said, "Your Majesty is wise. I admire you." He left. Yinshian.com came to see me and heard the end of the conversation. He gnashed his teeth at me and said, "Why are you still trying to save that dog emperor? You might as well go and see him and make him angry to death. Then we can rest easy." I waved my hands and said, "Let's put things aside. Chu Qianan was a good emperor. The people still had a good life under his rule. It has been said time and again. The death of an emperor is a national tragedy. The whole country is in mourning. We are still. Where's the wine?" Yin Xian was still angry. Then I shouldn't tell him that there is a long way to go. I smiled. The so-called long future ahead is just that once he enters the palace, it is as deep as the sea, and I, a man of the martial arts world, will grow old in the martial arts world. The rest of my life is long, but we will never see each other again. The owner of the restaurant knocked on the door at this time. "Girl, a new little sheener is here to show his talent. Please come in." 16 young men lined up in front of me. "What talents do you have?" They all lifted up their outer robes, revealing their abdominal muscles. I stood up, clapped my hands, and cheered loudly. "Good. Over."